Welcome to the news. So we're starting to try to freestyle, like freestyling in music, for example, but with iMovie. Trying to transition to iMovie to start to freestyle with video, if possible. Try to use video and visualizations to be able to transition into more, ideally, awareness and outreach through the branding elements that are connected to something I call a wheel that correlates to, in essence, various host of differing affiliate outlet connections to Dinky T Change for Games, Dinky Tech and Change for Games Studios as the parent brand that corresponds to attempting to steadily widen awareness through tools addition of tools, in other words, and trying to just kind of focus on like not losing, which is like a prop firm strategy. A prop firm in itself is a way to access like 50 to 300K apparently in capital, and not losing these accounts means keeping them alive, means that's the strategy, meaning not chasing high flashy objects, not trying to chase significant high drastic goals. It's developing a range of risk versus value. It's like developing a range and trying to keep this range in mind, more or less. Whereas, like, in other words, the idea is to stay on the low end of range, and this corresponds to a higher related item corresponding to the rest of life, where in essence you're focusing on a high value of range, the low end of the range, meaning like the range corresponds to, I guess, risk, maybe, so like risk, and this corresponds to many different things in life. And so in trading, for example, like you just want to not lose, and that's a way to get through prop firm accounts. Prop firm accounts, again, allow you to pass challenges and to be able to access higher value capital, 50 to 300K, by passing prop firm challenges, by showing that you can trade. It shows you have temperament, it shows you have discipline, it shows you have an ability to be patient and have respect for the markets, more or less. And so with this in mind, this is a matter of not losing. That's like the lowest end of the range. The highest end of the range is the highest amount you could possibly make in one day in trading. But for example, if you go the lowest end of the range of just trying to not quit, it's a matter of sustainability, and the sustainability is meant to be sustainable, and that conceptual mindset corresponds to the essence of what our brand is attempting to revolve around, if you will. And so that means going with the lowest end of the range, meaning taking the lowest return on any given output that's put into any given activity, is what corresponds to just trying to stay alive, keep it in motion, keep it going. And this corresponds to how to evolve all business processes, all people, all fluid, dynamic, conceptual asset energy and motion across the whole world, with all people, with all conceptual ways of enhancing our existing flow of existence. And this is something I think I call the action bank. It's like an action bank. So everybody around the world is focused on money, putting their money into banks, and then also wanting to grow their money with assets, whereas this is the symbol of an action bank, whereas like this action bank is focused around, for example, trading is an action. So that action, again, corresponds to wanting to get a return on investment that corresponds to staying in the game, staying alive, keeping it flowing, keeping it going. And this whole conceptual dynamic also relates to the wheel that I mentioned before. It also relates to growth that corresponds to any given task that you're focusing on, and focusing on where you're at now, meaning like as opposed to just focusing on the growth, focusing on where you want to go, you're also focusing on where you're at now and trying to acknowledge an evaluation of that, like meaning what's working right now, what is good, as opposed to just focusing on the things that you don't have. It's focusing on trying to actually develop a data like place to stand on, like a lily pad that you're standing on. It's made of data, and that is a structure, that's a thing to push off from, as opposed to thinking, oh, I don't have anything, I want to be somewhere else. It's like you're standing on a lily pad and you're trying to hop to another lily pad, and in terms of a frog reference. And so with that in mind, it's taking this mindset and this notion, and that's what we're talking about with iMovie, using iMovie as an iteration expression process, leveraging like video in terms of value addition to the existing sound brand of Dinky T Change for Games, and trying to use that as sort of the next aspect of a lily pad, because it really did take quite a long time to start doing podcasts, if you will, and these podcasts are blurps of value that took a minute to try to aggregate, and that corresponds to steps at a time, little lily pads, because a frog can only jump so far. And that's the basis. It's not, that's the basis of the mindset, of the example, of the flow. And so by keeping that in mind, an action bank across the world corresponds to the essence of everyone in the world taking just, little bits at a time to try to develop, and leveraging tools to try to be able to close gaps, and at the same time correspond to getting new tools and getting new affiliates to make the process efficient and functional, to be able to grow and flow and add more asset processes as time can go along. But nonetheless, this range of items that you can be doing at any given time in the day, there's a range. So there's something called asymmetric risk. And if you're trying to, it does have to do with just staying in the game also. Asymmetric risk means you want to focus on high value items to try to advance any given business, any given process, so that it grows as fast as possible. So you focus on high value, but still asymmetric risk, meaning low risk, so that if it is a thing that's high value but it takes time, then you take it in bites, take it in strides, take it in chunks, and then at the same time, the idea is to still not be overwhelmed, because it's just new feelings in essence. Just like iMovie is a new feeling to a certain extent. It's a new feeling, it's a new dynamic, it's a new form of media, and also trying to facilitate different platforms for communication, which corresponds to the center of communication as the focal element to try to step into the new direction. And this corresponds to loops and circles and circuitry in essence, because in essence it's kind of like the idea, this corresponds to the idea of money in of itself and what money stands for and what money serves as. Money is meant to serve as the most valuable things in the world. The most valuable things, in air quotes, in the world, which means, for example, there's all kinds of things that, you can focus on that are high value, but money is supposed to actually symbolize the highest value things in the world, what people actually need and want, more or less, to stay afloat and exist and continue to thrive and survive. And so when I say that, to transition things from non-money to money is a matter of trying to thrust them into the value plane that money is circulating in. Basically, money circulates in a plane of existence that is value land. Call it value land, and pretend value land is 7 or 20 feet, 7 or 17 feet off of the ground. It's above the ground. It's not on the ground. So you have to be able to have a mechanism to be able to get that 7 or 17 feet off the ground. And the point being is that money corresponds to closed circuit systems. This is the problem with trying to start a business, trying to get money and not necessarily having all the steps in place. Because for example, a mentor stands for, is a symbol for a closed circuit system, because they've already experienced money, they've already gotten to money. And also, if you invest in a public company, that's like a closed circuit system, because they're already cash flowing, and a lot of times you get a dividend which shows that you're on the team of someone who's already making money, and they're giving you money for investing in a cash flowing process. And that's the basis or interest of investing in a public stock with dividends, for example, or other cash flowing assets that will give you cash because they're already cash flowing, and that's a closed loop circuit process. And this goes down to the private markets. And what I mean by this is the private markets are very, very, very full of opportunity, so much demand that can be connected to supply. But the problem is something is connecting the loops. Connecting the loops sometimes require pieces to connect the loops that can't necessarily be connected. So in the private markets, or trying to develop a connection of a closed loop, Sometimes or many times it requires a guide, a mentor, someone to physically have the tools that is a full circle, full loop process to be able to connect loops in business. And it's good to consult people. It's good to have people, like even YouTube is significant for having value, that people have connected loops and made items work. And so that's, I guess, the basis for connecting this idea of the range, of having a range of potential for any given opportunity, and just keeping things alive. Because having patience, having a mindset to wait and to have patience and to just not stop and keep going and keep flowing, causes the ability to find the abilities to close a loop, close a closed loop system by having the ability to be patient enough to wait till some of the tools can come into play to complete the loop into an actual circle that's cash flowing. And it's a higher value process by focusing on higher value loops that are missing certain parts, so that you can take the time, and you can take the time that you need to just not walk away from the loop, because eventually it's worth it. It proves to be worth it. The numbers check out. There's enough potential reward behind it, so that in essence, by you taking the time, the ample amount of time sometimes, that it's about closing loops and just staying in the game. And this corresponds to the action bank. The action bank corresponds to, again, just like a trading account. You want it to not go away. You want it to not die, not stop, not cease existing. When things are really important, it's about just keeping them alive. Like prop firm accounts, if it's very important, if you can get access to $100,000 or more with a prop firm account, you want it to not go away, not die. So focusing on that and playing that game versus getting a certain amount of profit every day, a certain amount of profit every day, a certain amount of profit every day, that is more like selfish. That's more entitlement. You think you're entitled to that cash or that reward, and that's not the game. The game is hoping to try to stay around, stay in existence, and that causes the ability to have a longer term process and route to try to take and make actions that are like asset actions that correspond to the action bank in the world, that can make the world a better place by focusing on the minimal side of the range of potential, not the high end side where you're trying to make profit, because that corresponds to self-centeredness and more self-focus, as opposed to the process itself. You didn't invent the game of trading. So that's something to have empathy for, that you didn't invent the game of trading. It's about that. It's in acknowledging that the opportunity is something unique and significant, and to be able to try to garner and to try to give a little appreciation or padding to the process itself for existing, because someone else made the process so you could play the game. And so just trying to have that empathy towards the ability to try in the game is something that corresponds to playing on the low end of the range of potential outcomes, and trying to play towards having a potential interest in appreciation for getting to play the game, to just stay alive in the game, which speaks to the winners who are trying to focus on the longer term ability to play the game, as opposed to the outcomes, which are short term and very self-centered and relate to entitlement and a matter of spiritual finance, a matter of triangulating, reconfiguring purpose from an internal perspective to try to focus on just getting through and trying to enjoy the process, because it's a lot longer of a process than sometimes people realize in the private markets to develop a closed loop system. And that's why people that put money in to try to get money out are oftentimes rewarded, because money has to do with the highest value symbols in the world, and those symbols congregated in the form of money is what are also rewarded when money is contributed into investments, so you get more money out of it, because money, if it is a good investment, if they're not normal investments, but if they're investments that are cash flowing, that also are yielding cash flow, and they're not scams, and they're not fallouts, and they're not negative trickeriness, then it's a matter of rewarding that cash for the job that it has done to aggregate value in the world and speak to value, to give more value back to it. And that's something that humans, for the most part, don't necessarily think of in terms of the alignment with the value generation and consistency of a personality, and an alignment with a personality to be able to try to go along with what money's intent is, or the personality of money is asking you to be aligned with, to be able to get money, so to speak, which is kind of hard to explain, obviously, and it's hard to maybe even understand after listening to this whole podcast, for sure. But it's a matter of standing on the low end of the range of all given potential of what you're looking at in terms of where you're at, where you're trying to go, and acknowledging where you're at to begin with, to try to stem forward and move forward by staying on the low end of the range, only hoping for the low end of the range of potential outcomes, so that in essence it can hopefully be more sustainable to acknowledge where you're at, what's working now, and trying to take small steps forward, small baby steps forward instead of big giant steps forward because you think you deserve it, or you think it should work that way, or you think you should just take more bites of something than you can actually chew or stomach necessarily, and that therefore could cause ingestion or whatever, indigestion. And the bottom line is to just try to sustain small bites or whatever, to just know that you won't, that's sustainable to exist going forward. And that's the basis, that's the bottom line, that's gratitude, that's why, because it's gratitude. That's the bottom line, that's sort of the punchline, is to be able to relate, to get to these closed circuit processes, to even work with a mentor. They would highly hope to, maybe have gratitude for your being able to spend time in their presence and stuff, to be able to keep it going after all, and because the gratitude is like the fuel for them after all. And so that is the basis, I suppose, to try to be able to get into more closed loop processes, which close the loop of making cash flow, which rewards value with value, more or less, in that money system of money life or whatever, and spiritual finance, which this little chit chat is about. And to be able to try to expand these closed loops, these circles, these closed loops, these circles, these closed loops across the world in the form of actions. It's the form of actions and acting in alignment with assets, with money, so that these circles and these closed loops around the world, among every human being, among all their ambitions, among all their goals, among all their focuses, can be complemented by tools, can be complemented by the potential to paint forward motion beyond the present moment with certain actions, and taking actions and banking on those actions, because the bet from the status moving forward from the day before into the next day is trying to be a sustainable bet that you can make those inches forward on a consistent basis, so that the action bank, can try to give you loans. It's a bank of spiritual finance, trying to give you some kind of appreciation to make motion forward, because it's just hopefully sustainable actions, and you're trying to play the low end of the range to keep moving forward, if you will, and to not end the system, and so that someday that the cycle can complete, and someday if you're making a business in this instance in the private markets, you're trying to complete the loop and make your own business so that it cash flows, and you get one of the higher rewards of potential time investments and energy investments, which is what a business is, eventually, for it to cash flow, to give you cash and money back, in essence, as opposed to just using money to get money back. And it's similar with prop firms, which is using other people's money to do the same thing anyway. But that's all for now. More or less, I probably overstated this whole thing. It maybe wasn't necessary to do this all to chit-chat about this or whatever, but it's trying to acknowledge that there is a range to begin with, and acknowledging that range of potential outcomes when you're trying any given thing. And those actions in the action bank are trying to be more so appreciated and approved by the action bank, the loans of getting to where you're going in terms of spiritual finance, guiding somehow the motion from the present to that place of resolve, if you will, or interest, if you will, based on the action bank sort of trying to approve the status of the foundation of the progress, if you will, or the motion, if you will, of the motion forward with little sustainable steps on the lower end of the range, based in sort of gratitude for playing the game, and it being more about the journey than the destination, if you will, I suppose you could say, and such. And that's all for now. Thanks again. Dinky Tech, Change for Games. Dinky T, Change for Games. Dinky Tech, Change for Games, and Change for Game Studios. Bye. Peace. Bye. And let's all remember to push for world peace every single day. Let's all remember to push for world peace every single day. Let's push for world peace every single day. And also, let's remember to try to clear the animal shelters. Let's clear all the animal shelters in the world. Let's clear all the animal shelters in the world, because we can foster all the shelter animals. We can adopt all the shelter animals in the world. We can rescue all the shelter animals in the world, and we can also hire the shelter animals as healers. We can also hire the shelter animals as healers all throughout the world so that they don't have to be mistreated in animal shelters, and we can clear the animal shelters, and we can hire the shelter animals as healers throughout our communities. Hire the shelter animals as healers throughout our communities, because they also work for free, and they could use better purpose and use better jobs and be able to add value and be therapeutic energy for humans and humanity, to help us be more harmonious as humans and among humanity for all the animals in the world, to clear all the animal shelters, to try to get them to transition their energy in terms of therapeutic energy to all humans, so we can clear the animal shelters to add value to humanity in terms of harmony if possible. And let's push for world peace every single day and clear the animal shelters every day. That's all for now. Thanks again, Dinky Tech and Change for Game Studios. Bye. Peace. Bye.